What if I told you that the beautiful white horse you see standing in a field is probably not white? It sounds impossible. You look at a horse with a completely white coat, a flowing white mane, and a white tail, and there's no question in your mind. That horse is white, but genetically speaking, something very different may be happening, because true white horses are incredibly rare, and the horse you call white may actually be gray. Even stranger, some horses that look completely white were born a completely different color, black, brown, chestnut, and as they grow older, their original color slowly disappears until almost nothing remains. So how does a black horse become white? Why do some horses turn white with age? And if most white horses aren't actually white, what are they? Today, we're uncovering the fascinating science behind the horses that seem to have been painted white, and by the end, you'll never look at a white horse the same way again. Let's start with the biggest misconception. When people say white horse, they usually mean a horse with a very light-looking coat. But in horse genetics, white and gray are not the same thing. A true white horse is born with a white coat. A gray horse usually isn't. Gray horses are born with their normal base color, and then something remarkable happens. Their hair gradually loses pigment as they age. Imagine a horse born completely black. As a young foal, it may look almost like a shadow. But then, over the years, white hairs begin appearing. First around the face, then around the body. More and more white hairs appear until the original dark coat becomes harder to see. Eventually, the horse may look almost completely white, but underneath all that hair, the horse is genetically gray. This is why photographs of gray horses at different ages can look like they're showing completely different animals. A dark foal, a gray teenager, and an almost snow-white adult can all be the same horse. And there's an important clue. If you look closely at many mature gray horses, especially around the face and legs, you may notice darker skin underneath the hair. The coat looks white, but the skin isn't. That's one of the clues that you're looking at a gray horse rather than a true white horse. So what actually causes this transformation? It comes down to genetics. The gray gene affects how pigment is produced and maintained in the horse's hair over time. The horse isn't simply bleaching. Instead, the process is much more fascinating. As new hairs grow, they contain less pigment. That means each new coat can contain more white hairs than the previous one. Think of it like replacing thousands of colored threads with white threads, one thread at a time. The horse doesn't suddenly wake up one morning and become white. It happens gradually, and the speed can vary dramatically from horse to horse. Some gray horses become almost completely white relatively early in life. Others keep a darker, speckled appearance for much longer. This is why you can see gray horses with completely different patterns. Some are dark gray, some are silver, some have beautiful flecks all over their bodies, and some eventually become so light that you might swear they're pure white. But here's where things get even more interesting. A gray horse can continue changing throughout its entire life. Its appearance isn't necessarily fixed. The horse you see today may look noticeably different several years from now, and that means gray isn't really a single color. It's more like a lifelong transformation. Now imagine meeting a beautiful horse with a snowy white body. You might assume it was born that way, but if it's a gray horse, the reality could be completely different. That horse may have entered the world with a dark coat. A black foal could eventually become a silver-gray horse. A bay foal could gradually become gray. A chestnut-colored foal could also develop a gray coat, and this creates one of the most amazing transformations in the horse world. You can literally watch a horse's appearance change as it grows. This is also why owners sometimes have old photographs of their horses that seem almost unbelievable. Someone might show you a picture of their white horse as a foal, and suddenly you're looking at a dark brown or nearly black baby horse. Then you see the same horse years later, and it's almost completely white. Same horse, same DNA, completely different appearance. And that's the secret. The horse didn't necessarily change its fundamental identity. Its coat changed. Now, there's an important twist. True white horses do exist. They're just much rarer than people think. Unlike most gray horses, some horses with certain genetic variants can be born with an almost entirely white coat. And this is where genetics gets extremely interesting. There isn't just one simple white horse gene. Different genetic mechanisms can produce horses with very little or no visible pigment. Some of these horses can have pink or partially pink skin and very light hair. This can look dramatically different from a gray horse. So if you ever see a horse that is completely white from the moment it's born, you're looking at something very different from the typical gray horse that gradually loses pigment. And that's why the word white can be misleading. Two horses can look almost identical from a distance, while genetically, they may be completely different. One may have spent decades slowly losing visible pigment. The other may have been born white. Same appearance, different genetic story. There's another fascinating question. Why would evolution produce a gene that makes a horse gradually lose its coat pigment? Scientists know that the gray trait is associated with changes in pigment-producing cells, but the exact biological story behind the trait is more complicated than simply saying the horse turns white. And there is another important reason researchers study gray horses. The genetic mechanism responsible for graying is associated with an increased risk of certain melanomas in gray horses. That doesn't mean every gray horse will develop one. Far from it. But the connection is well known in veterinary medicine and genetics. So this beautiful transformation has a biological side that isn't quite as glamorous as the silver coat. And it reminds us of something important. Animal appearance isn't just about beauty. Every coat color tells a genetic story. The patterns we see on the outside are clues to what's happening underneath. And perhaps that's what makes gray horses so fascinating. They're not simply white. They're living examples of change. A gray horse can begin life dark and slowly become lighter year after year. Some develop dramatic dapples. Some become almost silver. Some develop tiny flecks that create a unique pattern. And some eventually become so pale that only a few darker hairs remain. No two horses necessarily follow exactly the same visual journey. That's why seeing a gray horse isn't just seeing a color. You're seeing a stage in its life. A photograph captures one moment, but the horse may look completely different years later. And that makes these horses almost feel magical. But the magic isn't supernatural. It's genetics. It's biology. It's time. And that's the secret behind the white horse. So the next time you see a stunning white horse, stop for a second. Look at its coat. Look closely at its skin. And ask yourself, was this horse always this color? Because there's a good chance the answer is no. That beautiful pale horse may have once been black, brown, or chestnut, and over the course of its life, its coat slowly transformed. What looks like a white horse may actually be the final chapter of a lifelong genetic process. And honestly, that's even more incredible than simply being born white, because the horse didn't just have a beautiful coat, it changed. So now you know the secret. Most horses that look white aren't truly white. They're gray horses, wearing the result of years of genetic change. And once you know that, you'll never look at a white horse quite the same way again. If you love horses and want to discover more of the incredible secrets hiding behind their appearance, behavior, and genetics, subscribe to the channel, because there's a lot more about horses that look simple until you look closer.